Yep, we're good.
Actually, it opened up YouTube. Okay,
All right. Let me know when you're ready.
I'm ready.
You good? All right. Cool. Well, hello, everyone who will be, watching this video in the future. Tonight, I am lucky enough to be joined by our founder and chief visionary officer here at College Knowledge, Donovan Lindsay. Donovan brings an immense amount of knowledge from his prior experiences working in college admissions office and working with many different types of students. And he is super happy to be here tonight, ready to share some information um, specifically related to the standardized testing part of the admissions process. So first off, Donovan, just thank you for being here. I'm excited to get started.
Likewise, thanks for hosting.
Yeah. Okay, so I would just sort of like us to start. Can you just give us a good definition and idea of what are standardized tests in the college admissions process?
Sure. So, standardized tests is basically something in its word, it's standardized. So, standardized tests is something that any student going into a specific college or university can take that will give them almost like an equal playing field as the test is concerned when they are applying to a college or university. So, there's no advantage or disadvantage to you or me taking the test as the test is concerned. We're going to be asked the same type of questions, not exactly the same questions, because I can only imagine how many questions there actually are for the standardized tests. But there's two different types that students can take. They can take the SAT test or they can take the ACT test. And then what universities will use that for, in addition to other types of admissions criteria, they will use that to determine a student's eligibility level to get in to that specific school based on the test scores that the student has obtained.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Um, so can you explain sort of the main types of standardized testing that students may see?
Yeah, so one of the main types is the SAT. The SAT stands for the Scholastic Assessment Test. And that is primarily going to be math, and also you're going to look at like a reading and like a writing section. You're going to be looking at a score between a 400 and a 1600 being the highest of the scores, and that's going to be offered by College Board. So many students during their college search are get familiar with College Board because that's some place you can go to search for colleges themselves. And then
Yeah.
that's also where you're able to schedule the SATs. Also on College Board, you'll see, there's just different tips and tools and different things like that to help students begin to prepare. There's also something called the PSAT. So basically the practice SAT test that students can also take, and just to really prepare them for the actual SAT test. So it's always good to prepare, especially if you're really looking at taking it and doing well, and if it's going to be something that your school is going to be requiring you taking the schools that you're looking to get into, college, university wise.
Okay, thank you. And aren't there specific scholarships related to the PSAT if students perform pretty well in those?
Yeah. So depending on your score level on that test, and even I would say the SAT and ACT at times, you can, when you're looking for scholarships for college while you're in high school, as long as you're able to prove or send them the test scores or something like that, then you're able to be basically entered into a specific scholarship pool for students. So, if we score the same, there's other criteria, of course, that they're going to be looking at, and if it's competitive, not just everyone's going to get it, but that does drastically get you into a bunch of different scholarship pools. If you are, really taking the test seriously and really prepping, you can make out pretty good when it comes to getting some financial aid for school.
Yeah, nice. I mean, that's what we talked about last time. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring that up again as just another opportunity to, seek those scholarships out.
Hmm.
In your answer there, you mentioned ACT as well, right? Can you
Sure.
just dive a little deeper into that? Maybe how that differs, maybe how it compares to the other type of tests?
Sure. So the ACT is the American College Test, and that is going to offer more subjects. So, for instance, like science is one. Oh, excuse me. The SAT has like more of a like a combined like writing-ish reading section, whereas the ACT has you're going to be looking at like English, you're going to be looking at math, you're going to be looking at reading, you're going to be looking at science, optional writing. As of I think it was May or maybe it's April of 2025, this year that we're in now. Science is optional on the test for the ACT. So students who, really looking at which one you take, students should look at what subjects are on the test. So if one school usually will accept one, they will accept the other test. So if one school accepts the SAT, they accept the ACT. So when you're looking at kind of deciding on which test, really, I would say look at the subjects. For instance, if I was really good in science, which I wasn't, but let's say I was really good in science in high school, I may gear towards taking the ACT because my score would be looked at a little bit differently because science would be incorporated into my score, whereas the SAT doesn't have science. Time wise, I think you're looking at right under about 3 hours for the ACT test. It is scored out of 1 through 36, so scoring is also drastically different. So if you're submitting your test to the schools, though, the schools know how to almost look at them equal or equivalent. Like they have a range of what they're kind of looking for both of the tests because they know that they're scored differently. But and then you can schedule the ACT test right on ACT's website, act.org. So time wise, it's going to be a little bit different time wise. ACT and also SAT, just time wise, are going to be a little bit different, but also cost. The ACT is going to be longer as they do, of course, offer more sections.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. So you mentioned, focusing on the subjects,
Mhm.
which, the different test covers as one of the factors to consider when thinking about which test to take. Are there any other factors students should consider, prior to registering for these and taking these tests, or is that really the one big one?
The biggest, yeah, definitely would be, you know, what what subjects are on there. I would also say SAT could be better for students who are better or stronger as it relates to like math and like data analytics or analysis. ACT may be a little bit better for students stronger in like the science and quicker at reading. Both of the tests now as of about a year or so ago, you can take online, so you can take them virtually. So I know that's not something that potentially you, for instance, when you were going into college, that was offered, but students don't have to like physically go somewhere. They can take it virtually. And one of the nice things about the virtual test is it's it changes the test as you take the test. So it kind of adapts. So if it sees that I'm doing a little bit better in one area, it gets kind of like a little bit stronger, a little bit harder in that area to kind of really test like your knowledge on different things. And the same thing if it sees that you're not doing as well, the questions basically they get altered. So you and me can start here but you can be going a little bit like this and I can be going like this way. We're getting asked the same types of questions to still test our knowledge, but it's testing it in a little bit of a different way depending on how you're answering the different sections of the test. So I forget what the word that they use or the exact word that they call it, but both of them are basically like a smart test where they begin to really tailor the answers based off of how you're answering the question. The digital versions of both of the test two are also going to be shorter in time frame than the longer tests because they're able to gauge you and how you're doing a lot quicker just because of it's a smart test basically. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
analytics and things going on behind the scene that really are going to be able to help predict how you answer future questions. So, yeah, both of them you can take virtually. Again, I would say more so looking at the subjects, looking at the things that you're more so interested in. And then I would also too say it doesn't hurt to take both of them. So you take one and you take another and you look at whether or not where your scores are. And regardless of where your scores are, then let's say you take this in ninth or 10th or 11th grade, early or 10th or like early 11th grade, then you've got some time to be like, okay, I scored better on, let's say, the SATs. So now I'm going to focus on getting better at this one instead of this one. So, it doesn't hurt to take both, but I would say really don't focus on continually retaking both, but you can also like retake the test if you want it. And I would say for students that are, really trying to improve their score, try to take both of them early, and then from there, just kind of focus on one to improve upon.
Okay, so there's no like hard cap where the students cannot take the test any longer before like when they have to have them in for college applications.
Yeah, so even once you've applied to some colleges, they will allow you to submit new scores. So there's really no cap. I mean, you do have to pay for the test in some instances, depending
Sure.
on your financial situation, or potentially your school could offer it for free. There could be different waivers, but in all reality, you're going to be paying for this test each time. Like there's a cost associated with it. So as much as money you want to spend out the 60 to 90 something bucks for the test, you can continually take them.
Yeah.
I would say if you're not noticing drastic increases, it's probably not smart to keep taking them. But I know students at times they'll go up like maybe 10 points on the SAT, and then basically they kind of cap out around there no matter how many times that they're taking it.
Yeah.
So there's really no limit to the amount of times that you can take the test.
Okay. So, as you mentioned, like you were saying, you're talking about scores and when students are evaluating if they should retake it or
Hmm.
not. How can a student decide if their score is a good score, right? Because every student is different. Every student is strong in different areas. How can a student decide, okay, this score is about what I'm capped at. This is a good score for me.
Sure. I would say my biggest suggestion when you're taking the test, before you even take the test, and if you know what colleges or universities that you're interested in, see if they require the test. Because sometimes I've talked with students, they're like, here's my top 5 schools that I want to get into. And then they look and I'm like, well, you're stressing about taking the SATs. None of them even require the SATs. So that's first and foremost. I always tell students, see first if the schools that you're interested in even require the test. But then on every college's admissions website, you're going to see a mid-range. So you're going to see the mid-range of students that were accepted to that school over maybe the last year or two. It's going to show you, like, let's say for the SATs. Again, that's out of 400 to 1600. You may see the mid-range of the students that they accept or have accepted over the last couple of years would be between, let's say, a 1300 and a 1500. So if you're kind of within that range, let's say you take the test once and you're within that range, probably good. You don't really have to take it again because you're within that range. If you're more so at the bottom of that range, maybe it's a 12 something, 11 something, you probably do want to retake that test and really see whether or not if it makes sense for you to continually take the test to try to improve. I would also say in that instance, if you may be lower on the lower end, then potentially it might be a good idea to then take the other test. So maybe if you've taken the
Mhm.
SAT, then take the ACT. And then from there, that's scored again between a 1 and a 36. So maybe, they're the mid-range for the scores that students that they've accepted over the last couple of years is 29 to a 33.
Yeah.
And you take that and then you've got a 29, you've got a 30. Then it's like, okay, maybe I'm going to submit this instead of this. One of the things that some universities also do is do what they call super scoring. So super scoring is when they take multiple tests that you've taken and they will take the highest from each. So let's say on the reading and writing component of the SAT, you received a 700. And then on the math, you received a 600. Whereas, now your score, you've got you've got 1300 on your SATs. But the next time you take it, you score the same again on the reading writing portion. So you've got a 700 on the reading writing portion. But this time on the math portion, you've got an 800. You basically scored, at the top where you need it. They're still going to take that same reading score. That's going to be there because you didn't test any higher, and then they're just going to take the math score that's higher and combine that.
Mm.
So they will take super scoring is basically when you take it multiple times, they will always pick out the highest score and basically combine it. Not all schools do that,
Yeah.
but some schools do. So it could be to a student's advantage to really just focus on one specific area that they're not as strong in if they've taken it already and they know they've got a high score in one area because that score will then not go away, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's pretty big. You mentioned not all schools do this. Are these typically on the school's admissions websites? Are there any
Yeah.
data sets online where they can view this type of information?
Yeah, for the most part, you'll see when you look at the admissions criteria for a school, you're going to see what if first off, you're going to see if they accept the test, because a couple of things can happen. They cannot accept the test and not require it at all. They can accept the test and have a test optional. So at that time, it's going to be up to the student to decide whether or not they're going to submit the test. It doesn't affect the student negatively if they do not submit the test, because a college or university is only going to be allowed to judge you on the materials that you've submitted. That's why I was saying it's very important for students to really look at that range and decide whether or not they should practice or they should even take the test more times. So, and then the test can, of course, just simply be required. They could require one of the standardized tests, and then, of course, at that time, it's up to the student to decide which one that they are going to take. But when you're looking at submitting your scores, you could apply to University A and your scores are within range and they can be test optional. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to submit my scores here. You can apply to University B, their criteria and what they're looking for is a little bit higher, and then don't submit your scores to that one. So it doesn't really hurt taking the test. I would say, take them at least once just to see kind of where you are. And then you can decide whether or not you want to submit them or if you want to keep taking them to test higher. So when students will ask me or parents will ask, does it make sense to take it? I'm like, it can't hurt, especially to our point earlier when it comes to potentially that unlocking some financial aid for students, depending on the scores of either the practice test or the actual test. It doesn't hurt to take it, but I would just say don't spend too much time continually retaking it if it doesn't make sense. Like there's a lot of things that a student needs to consider when they are going to be considering retaking the test and spending not just the time, but at times too, a lot of the money that they're spending to retake the test.
Yeah. It's really important that you mentioned that. I know from my high school experience, some of the people around me, there was this belief that, if you didn't submit your test in an application where the school is test optional, that it would be held against you. The school would be like, what are you hiding? And you saying that, schools will only judge your application based on what you have submitted. I
Yeah.
think that that's really important for students to hear
Yeah.
throughout the
And I mean, I
process.
get that. I get that question a lot, especially after, I mean, a lot of schools who required standardized tests prior to the pandemic happening. Every school basically had to begin to evaluate students because they had to, because all the tests were canceled because they were all in person at the time. They had to basically evaluate students without it. So over time, we're seeing more schools that are either not bringing it back or just making it optional. And some universities have just really just reinstated that you have to take the standardized test. But if it's optional, again, nothing that you don't submit they can judge you on. But you have to be smart about submitting your scores
Yeah.
because if you don't, if you're not within that range, like, let's use the example again, their mid-range is 1300 to 1500, where most of their students that they've accepted from the previous year are coming in, where you have that mindset, well, I have to submit it anyway, even though it's test optional, It's going to hurt you if you submit like an 1100. It's going to benefit you way more because that's going to bring you down a bit because you're not within what they're looking for. So yeah, great point, but that is something, a question that I often get from students and parents is, well, doesn't that look negative if I don't submit it? And I like, no, if you don't submit it, they can't judge you for it. Like there's nothing in like their criteria where it's like, Braden didn't submit this test.
Yeah.
He probably didn't do good on it. Like there's no assumptions that are being made.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. So yeah, like the two main things students and their families should be considering when, you know, taking these tests and registering. First is if the school requires that specific test or any test at all. And then the second, that mid-range of
Mhm.
scores that they typically accept. Those are the two main things that students should be looking at. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And
So
that's all on their website. And if you have questions, I mean, just call the admissions office. That's why they're there. A lot of students and parents will seem like they're bothering the admissions office. And I remember talking with a parent when I worked in college admissions, and she's like, I got one more question. I'm sorry I'm bothering you. I literally said to her on the phone, if you didn't have questions, I wouldn't be here. Like if everything was just as straightforward as, you wished it was, I wouldn't have a job. So literally just call if you don't find it on a website. Sometimes it's there, but it's just buried because there's so much information and it can get overwhelming. But feel free to just call or email the admissions offices and they can, quickly tell you what they're looking for.
okay, awesome. So for students that, might not be satisfied with their score, maybe they've taken each test once, something similar to that. What are some resources available to students rather than just brute force, just hoping they'll do better next time? What are some resources available to students, to help improve their scores?
So I'd say first really is looking at your school, like looking at, a math teacher or an English teacher, or reading teacher that you can go to and ask about it because some schools also will have like for my school, for high school, for instance, we had a SAT prep class that we were required to take. So part of that was like we went through the types of questions, how to answer them, how to prepare, those types of things. But there's so many different online resources that students can also utilize, whether it's just going to YouTube or going to the SAT or ACT websites and looking at some of I know they have like PDFs and those types of things, and then their own practice tests also. I know there's something called the Khan Academy, KHAN, and they have a lot of different resources that students can use. There's books out there. I mean, there's a lot of different resources. I mean, there's so many different types of like learning styles that people have and how they retain information. I would say, depending on how you feel you learn best, whether it's someone talking to you, maybe that's a video, or maybe that's a teacher that you're asking for additional help or support, or even hiring a private tutor or something like that to help. I know people have companies that will, specifically specialize in helping people take the SATs or the ACTs, or not just taking them, but improving their score. And then again, just a PDF like you can get from one of the websites. Or, they have various different books out there that kind of guide you and walk you through how to improve your test scores for
Yeah.
both of the tests.
I really, really like that option that you brought up with going to a teacher at your school. Because believe it or not, students like they do want you to succeed. And I'm sure they would like love a student taking the time, reaching out, and asking for assistance in some topics. So, yeah, that was a really good one.
And I would say too,
Um,
if you are asking someone for help, make sure you're giving them enough time.
yeah,
Let's say today's Monday and the test is this Saturday, not enough time.
yeah,
But if you're retaking it, as soon as you know you want their help because they get busy, other people could be asking them, especially around the time when you're submitting your college applications, they may be like writing letters of reference and all these different types of things. So I would say good to ask the teachers, but try to be smart about it and also give them enough time so they can prepare to help you.
for sure, for sure. So I know you mentioned for the SAT and the PSAT, sorry, students can register for those through the College Board. How can students go about registering for the ACT?
So ACT.org is actually their website. So ACT.org is the ACT website, and you can register right on there. They have a bunch of different resources that students can utilize on there too, and downloadable things. And then again, College Board oversees the SAT. So right on collegeboard.org is where you can register for that. And again, like I would say that would be the first place I would go if you have questions or you need help or resources. They have pages upon pages upon pages of like helpful tools and resources to help you out because you know they're the tests are there, but they want to be successful. They want you to be successful too when you are taking the test, whether it be the in person or the digital one. You know, where you're sitting, you know, at your computer or device.
Okay, cool. So these tests, they can be pretty daunting, especially for a lot of people who might not, just enjoy taking regular tests, right? So what mindset would you recommend students to have going into these tests? The morning of, what mindset do you recommend them going into the test with? Yeah.
So one of my favorite TV shows, and this was way before it got popular on Netflix, is Suits. And one of my favorite episodes of Suits is early in the season where two of the characters, Mike is talking with Rachel, and Rachel is studying for the LSATs. So the LSATs are the basically that's the standardized test for students looking to go into law school. And one of the things that he realizes that she's afraid of is getting questions wrong. So he's there, the book on the desk, and she's on the other side of the desk, and you know, it's a multiple choice test. So you've got, you know, A, B, C, or D. And her first answer, let's say, is A. And then she's like, well, maybe it's D. She's like, well, maybe it's C. And he's like, what's your final answer? She's like, C. And he goes, no, it was A. He's like, try to trust your gut before
Mm,
you really start to freak yourself out because you were right. And then as they're talking and she does the same thing over and over again, she's like, I don't want to get any questions wrong. He's like, that's the issue. Like you're gonna get questions wrong. The likelihood that you getting no questions wrong like it's astronomical, like almost like impossible. Like you're
right.
gonna get something wrong, but you can't let that psych you out. So on any test, really, you know, you can get psyched out because you get one or two wrong that you think, oh, I should know this. But as long as you kind of keep kind of a calm, you know, look at every question as just like a blank slate.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it as you just got this wrong and you're kind of holding on to that, that's weighing on your mind. The test is timed. It's not like you have an unlimited amount of time. Like you really have to have a kind of a clear head to go into it. So looking at kind of physical, how your physical and mental body work, you know, make sure you got some sleep. Make sure you've eaten. Like just make sure, you know, your mind's kind of clear because that's a very important test for a lot of people looking into getting into school. And there can be a lot of things that kind of derail you kind of mentally. So really trying to go into it with a clear mind and focused for the test, but also for every single question, because you can really just get derailed if you really start to just get in your head about one question, or you're like, oh, I'm gonna go back to that one. Like take it and kind of just move on.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely vouch for, getting a good night of sleep prior to the test. From my experience, I took the SAT twice, and I think each time it was on a Saturday morning, um, maybe around like 8, 7 o'clock.
Yeah, it's early.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely be thoughtful about that. And then one of my last questions. So you mentioned how, some colleges are going back to making it like required for students to take standardized testing. Some are on the other side of the field where they're just completely test optional and they're pretty comfortable staying there. Um, and just in general, like how do you see standardized testing evolving over the next 5 to 10 years, the use of it in the application process? I'm just sort of interested
Yeah,
by your answer.
so
Yeah.
there's almost like a lot of controversy just revolving around standardized tests because you know students aren't standardized. So now you're looking at it from the standpoint of how are all of these people preparing for this test from, you know, every state in the country or other countries. You know, people are taught differently. People are, there's so many nuances between, yes, this is a standardized test, but people prepare for this drastically differently. They're taught drastically differently. Their state or school district teaches drastically differently. So I think that um, things like having the test be virtual, for instance, yeah, it's kind of like, I would say, almost like coming out of the Stone Ages, because there
Yeah.
really wasn't much change from probably when I took the test to when you took the test, and there's probably 15 years of a difference between that. So when you look at overall from when I took it to you took it, getting up early, I remember that because it was like the time, even like the time for family, like everything's the same. But now having a digital version and also having a smart test, I think there's going to be a lot more technology that's going to be included. Because when you look at a classroom and you look at the workforce, like everything has had to evolve, but there's not much when it comes to the educational system in a classroom that has been forced to evolve. I mean, some places have like smart boards or you've got these other things, but you look at a classroom from 100 years ago to now, you have a table and chairs, a desk and a board. Like there's so many different other ways that you have to look at how do we educate people because people learn differently. People's interests are different. So I think having the tests digital now drastically helps. I'm hoping that there are more things that come up soon that help even more. But I think having the test digitally, but also having a smart test to really gauge where the student is helps. But I think too that should also almost alter drastically looking at the different sections of the test because again it's math, it's reading, you've got science on the ACT, but could there be more sections that are added to the standardized testing because again everyone has different interests.
Yeah. Um, I think it's pretty safe to say that it'll become a little bit more fluid than it has been. So do you have any last pieces of advice or tips you would like to share with students before we wrap this up?
I would say first off, if you're looking to take the SAT or ACT, make sure that you first off see if where you are interested potentially in going, take it. Doesn't hurt to at least take it once, especially as it relates to financial aid and scholarships and those types of things. Take it early, maybe 10th, early 11th grade, so you have time to take it again or practice or improve your score. The last thing you want is to try to take it at the beginning of your senior year and then can't get it for whatever reason. Maybe the test is canceled for weather, or you've got internet issues and you can't take the digital test. Like, don't wait to the last minute because colleges have their deadline. You've got some colleges that may be a little bit lenient, but when they have their deadline and that's a dream school that you're trying to get into, and you're like, well, my test scores are still waiting to come in, or I'm still waiting to take another test. That's great, but now you're not going to potentially be considered or have that option to submit those scores. So, and then also just make sure that you know make sure that you are aware of, like I was saying earlier with schools doing like super scoring, like make sure you're educated on if you're taking the test, how can you maximize your time taking the test and what you focus on. And of course, if you have any questions about how schools are considering the test or if you're confused on the website, simply contact the admissions office. That's the best thing that you can do. I know at times that may seem daunting, but I've worked with admissions counselors and I know admissions counselors from so many different places. They're just normal people. So just someone, with a job like anyone else, like just call them, call the office and ask them a question. They'd be more than happy to talk to you. But I'd say those are some of my lasting words and lasting tips.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Donovan, for joining me tonight and sharing this
Always.
information with me. And I look forward to our next session, which will be, I think, June 12th,
Yeah, can't wait.
beginning the college search. So, yeah, excited. Till next
Another
time.
good